The wedding dress tore as Cordelia Whitmore squeezed through the narrow window of the Millfield Station's waiting room, her voluminous skirts catching on the splintered frame. Behind her, the thunder of hoofbeats grew louder. Her father's men, closing in. She tumbled onto the dusty platform, silk and lace pooling around her like spilled cream, her heart hammering against her corset stays. "Please, God, let the westbound come soon," she whispered, clutching her carpetbag with trembling fingers. That's when she saw him. The Apache sat motionless on a weathered bench, his dark eyes taking in her disheveled state without judgment. His long black hair was bound with leather, and despite the sweltering Oklahoma heat of 1887, he wore a faded cavalry jacket over buckskin pants. Most white folks crossed the street when they saw Joaquin Nighthorse in town, but right now, Cordelia felt nothing but relief at finding another human being who wasn't trying to drag her back to a loveless marriage. "Ma'am." His voice was steady, respectful. "You appear to be in some distress." Cordelia's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, too nervous about the wedding to keep anything down. The sound echoed in the empty station like a gunshot. Without a word, Joaquin reached into a leather pouch at his side and withdrew a piece of hardtack and some dried venison. He extended it toward her, his calloused hand steady. "I couldn't possibly," she began, but her stomach betrayed her again with another rumbling protest. "Take it," he said simply. "A person shouldn't go hungry when food is available." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. She accepted the offered meal with shaking hands, tears threatening to spill over. "Thank you. I don't have any money to repay you." "No payment needed." Joaquin settled back on the bench, giving her space while keeping a watchful eye on the horizon. "Those riders coming for you?" Cordelia nodded miserably, taking a bite of the venison. It was tough but flavorful, seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify. "My father, my my intended husband." "I couldn't go through with it." "A woman should have a choice in such matters," Joaquin said, his tone matter of fact. "Not in my father's world." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing tears and dust. "Mortimer Blackthorne owns half the cattle in 3 counties. The match would secure father's business dealings. My feelings are inconsequential." Joaquin studied her face, noting the determined set of her jaw beneath the tears. "Where will you go?" "California, perhaps. I have an aunt in Sacramento who might—" The sound of approaching horses cut her off. Her face went white. "They've found me." Joaquin stood smoothly, his hand resting casually on the knife at his belt. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. Cordelia's voice shook. "My father, Blackthorne, and their men." "The westbound won't arrive for another hour," Joaquin said, calculating quickly. He looked at the terrified woman in her torn wedding dress, then at the dust cloud growing larger on the horizon. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he'd thought buried with his late wife 3 winters ago. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand. "Where?" Cordelia stared at his outstretched hand as if it were both salvation and damnation. "Somewhere they won't think to look." Joaquin's dark eyes held steady on hers. "Unless you'd rather face them now." The thunder of hooves grew closer. Cordelia grabbed his hand, gasping at the strength in his grip as he pulled her to her feet. "My bag. Leave it. We move fast or not at all." She hiked up her torn skirts and followed him around the station building to where a paint horse stood tethered in the shade. The animal was magnificent, white and brown patches gleaming in the afternoon sun, muscles rippling beneath a coat that spoke of good care and hard riding. "I can't possibly ride in this dress," Cordelia protested, even as Joaquin boosted her onto the horse's back. "You'll manage." He swung up behind her, his arm coming around her waist to steady her as the horse pranced sideways. "Hold on." They rode hard across the scrubland, Cordelia's wedding dress streaming behind them like a banner. of rebellion. She'd never ridden astride before, had never felt the wind whipping her hair free of its careful pins or the intoxicating sensation of speed and freedom. Despite her terror, something wild and long suppressed began to unfurl in her chest. Joaquin guided them through a maze of red rock formations and scrub brush, following paths invisible to white eyes. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they reached a hidden canyon where a small cabin nestled against the cliff face. "This is my place," he said, dismounting and helping her down. Her legs buckled slightly. She wasn't accustomed to such hard riding, and his hands remained on her waist until she steadied. "It's beautiful," she breathed, and meant it. A small garden grew beside the cabin, corn and beans climbing toward the sky. A stream trickled nearby, and the silence was profound after years of her father's bustling household. "My wife planted that garden," Joaquin said quietly, unsaddling his horse. "She said even in the wilderness, a person should have growing things. She had good sense." Cordelia smoothed her ruined skirts, suddenly aware of how she must look. "Is she away? Dead?" "These 3 years. Influenza." The simple words carried weight that made Cordelia's heart ache. "I'm sorry." Joaquin nodded acknowledgment but said nothing more. He led his horse to a small corral, then gestured toward the cabin. "You'll be safe here tonight. In the morning, I'll take you to the railroad junction at Cedar Creek. Trains run through there twice daily." Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished but scrupulously clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, shelves lined with books another. Cordelia ran her fingers along the leather spines, surprised to find Dickens and Whitman alongside works in what she assumed was Apache script. "You read?" she asked. "My wife taught me letters. I taught her tracking and hunting." Joaquin knelt by the fireplace, coaxing kindling to flame. "She said knowledge was like water. It finds its own level if you don't dam it up." Cordelia sank into a chair near the fire, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. "She sounds remarkable." "She was." He stood, dusting his hands. "There's venison stew from yesterday. Not fancy, but it'll fill you." As he ladled the stew into bowls, Cordelia studied his profile. Strong nose, high cheekbones, lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into sun and wind. His movements were economical, purposeful. Nothing like the soft-handed businessmen who populated her father's world. "Why did you help me?" she asked as he handed her a bowl. Joaquin settled across from her, considering his words. "My people believe the spirits sometimes put us in each other's paths for reasons we don't immediately understand. Perhaps I was meant to be at that station today. Or perhaps you're simply a good man in a world that seems rather short of them." Their eyes met across the small table, and something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding that their separate loneliness might find solace in shared company. Cordelia woke to the sound of rain drumming against the cabin roof and the rich aroma of coffee brewing. Pale morning light filtered through the single window, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory flooded back, the wedding, the escape, the mysterious Apache, who'd shown her more kindness than her own family. She sat up carefully, her body protesting after the hard ride. Joaquin had given her his bed while he slept on a bedroll by the fire. The gesture spoke of a gentility that would have surprised the townspeople who crossed themselves when he passed. "Morning," he said without turning from the stove. "Rains. Set in good. Won't be riding anywhere today." Cordelia smoothed her hair, acutely aware of her disheveled state. "Perhaps that's for the best. I suspect my father's men are still searching. They won't find this place." Joaquin poured coffee into a tin cup and set it before her. "Few white men know these canyons like I do." She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. "How long have you lived here?" "Since Singing Bird died. Couldn't stay in the village, too many memories. He settled across from her with his own cup. Built this place with my own hands. Haven't had company since. I'm grateful for your hospitality, but I don't wish to impose. You're not imposing. His dark eyes found hers. Yesterday, when I saw you on that platform, you reminded me of a trapped bird. Sometimes a creature needs help finding its way to freedom. Cordelia felt heat rise in her cheeks. And sometimes that creature discovers it doesn't know what to do with freedom once it has it. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rain. Cordelia found herself studying Joaquin's hands as he cradled his coffee cup strong, weathered with a thin white scar across the knuckles of his right hand. Hands that had built this sanctuary, that had offered food to a stranger without question. "Tell me about your wife," she said impulsively. Joaquin's expression softened. Singing Bird was like water finding stone. Gentle, but persistent. She could track a deer through running water and sing the birds from the trees. She saw beauty everywhere in a sunset, a spider's web, the way light moved through leaves. She sounds wonderful. She would have liked you, I think. Would have fed you properly and found you decent clothes. He gestured toward her torn wedding dress. That contraption can't be comfortable. Cordelia laughed despite herself. It weighs nearly as much as I do. I feel like I'm wearing a tent. Singing Bird's things are still here. She was similar to your build. Perhaps something of hers would suit you better. The offer was practical. Nothing more, but something in his tone made Cordelia's pulse quicken. To wear his dead wife's clothes seemed intimate somehow, a crossing of boundaries she wasn't sure she was ready for. I couldn't. She would want her things used rather than gathering dust. Joaquin stood and moved to a wooden chest in the corner. She always said possessions should serve the living, not memorialize the dead. He withdrew a simple dress of blue cotton, soft from many washings. This was her everyday dress. Plain, but well made. Cordelia accepted the garment with reverence. The fabric was faded but still beautiful, decorated with small white flowers embroidered around the neckline and sleeves. It's lovely. There's a screen in the corner. Privacy to change. As Cordelia slipped behind the woven screen, she marveled at how different this felt from the elaborate ritual of dressing at her father's house. No corset, no bustle, no layers of petticoats. Just simple, honest clothing made for a woman who worked with her hands and walked freely under the sky. The dress fit better than she dared hope. When she emerged from behind the screen, Joaquin's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Forgive me," he said quickly. The resemblance is striking. I hope that doesn't pain you." "No." He shook his head slowly. It single quotes S. comforting, somehow, as if she approves. The rain continued through the morning, creating a cocoon of intimacy. Around the small cabin, Cordelia found herself helping Joaquin with small tasks, grinding corn for bread, mending a torn shirt, organizing the books on his shelves. Their hands brushed as they worked, sending unexpected sparks through her veins. "You're educated," she observed, noting the careful way he handled the volumes. "More so than most of the men in Millfield. The reservation school taught us to read the white man's words," Joaquin replied, threading a needle with practiced ease. "But reading and understanding are different things. Singing Bird helped me see the heart behind the words. What do you do here? How do you live?" "I guide hunting parties sometimes. Track lost cattle for the ranchers. Trade furs and hides in town." He glanced up from his mending. "It's a simple life, but it's mine." Cordelia thought of her father's elaborate house, the constant stream of business associates and social obligations. Simple sounds wonderful. What was your life like? Before yesterday, I mean. She considered the question while grinding corn between her palms. like being a bird in a gilded cage. Beautiful surroundings, everything I could want, except the freedom to want it. Every moment planned, every word measured, every breath taken. In service to my father's ambitions. And the man you were to marry? Mortimer Blackthorne. The name tasted bitter on her tongue. 60 years old, twice widowed, with hands like raw beef and breath that could wilt flowers. He's wealthy and influential, which is all father cared about. Joaquin's jaw tightened. A woman deserves better than to be sold like livestock. Try explaining that to my father. Cordelia's voice carried years of frustration. According to him, my only value is in the alliance I can provide through marriage. Your value is not determined by what others can gain from you. The quiet conviction in his words made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. When had anyone ever spoken to her as if she had worth beyond her family connections? Why did you never remarry? She asked softly. Surely there are women who would, none who could fill the space Singing Bird left. His hand stilled on his mending. I thought I would carry her memory alone until I joined her in the spirit world. Thought? He looked up, meeting her eyes. Directly. Yesterday changed something. Seeing you there, needing help. It woke something I'd buried with her. The air between them seemed to thicken. Cordelia set down the grinding stone, her pulse hammering against her throat. Joaquin, ... I know it's too soon. I know we're strangers. But I've never felt so ... alive as I did yesterday, riding with you. As if the world suddenly had color again. She stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the rain-soaked landscape. I can't. I've just escaped one entanglement. I can't fall into another. This wouldn't be an entanglement. He rose and crossed to stand behind her, careful not to touch. This would be a choice, your choice. The warmth of his body so close to hers made her shiver. I don't know how to make choices. I've never been allowed to. Then learn. Start with small ones. His voice was gentle. Do you want coffee or water with your meal? Do you prefer to sit by the fire or at the table? Do you want to stay here? Where you're safe, or face the uncertain world beyond these walls? Cordelia turned to face him, surprised by his nearness. And if I choose to stay, then you stay. For as long as you want. People will talk. A white woman living with an Apache ... Let them talk. His dark eyes held steady on hers. The opinion of small minds has never dictated my actions. She reached up without thinking, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. His skin was warm, roughened by wind and sun. What would Singing Bird think of this? Joaquin caught her hand, pressing it flat against his cheek. She would tell you to follow your heart. She believed love was like the sky, vast enough to hold everything without diminishing what came before. By afternoon, the rain had softened to a gentle mist, and restlessness drove them both outside. Joaquin showed Cordelia his domain, the garden where neat rows of corn, beans, and squash grew in the traditional Three Sisters arrangement his wife had taught him. She listened intently as he explained how the plants supported each other, the corn providing structure for the beans to climb, the beans adding nutrients to the soil, the squash leaves shading the ground to retain moisture. Everything connected. She murmured, kneeling to touch a squash blossom. Everything helping everything else. The Apache way, Joaquin confirmed. Nothing exists in isolation. They walked the canyon rim as the mist cleared, revealing a vast expanse of red rock and purple sage stretching to the horizon. Cordelia had never seen such beauty, raw, untamed, magnificent in its indifference to human concerns. I feel so small. Here, she whispered, small can be good. It reminds us we're part of something larger than ourselves. She turned to study his profile, noting how completely at home he seemed in this wild place. Do you ever miss the company of others? I thought I preferred solitude. His eyes found hers. Now I'm not certain. They made their way back to the cabin as evening approached, working together to prepare the evening meal. The domestic intimacy felt both foreign and natural to Cordelia. She'd never cooked with a man before, never experienced the quiet pleasure of shared labor. I've been thinking about what you said, she ventured as they sat down to eat, about making choices. And I choose to stay, at least for now. The words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would make them easier. If the offer still stands. Joaquin's face remained impassive, but she caught the slight relaxation of his shoulders. It stands, for as long as you want. I don't know what I can offer in return. I can't track or hunt or... You can learn, if you want to. He cut a piece of venison with steady hands. I can teach you to live off the land, to read the sky for weather, to move through the wilderness without leaving traces. Why would you do that? Because a person should know how to survive, and because ... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I think Singing Bird would have wanted me to pass on what she taught me. Knowledge should flow like water, remember? That night, as they sat by the fire reading, she with a volume of Whitman, he with a journal filled with careful observations about weather and wildlife, Cordelia felt a peace she'd never known. The silence wasn't empty, but full, pregnant with possibility. Joaquin, she said softly, thank you. For saving me. For giving me space to figure out who I am. He looked up from his journal, firelight playing across his features. Who are you, Cordelia Whitmore? She considered the question seriously. I don't know yet. But for the first time in my life, I'm excited to find out. That's a good beginning. Later, as she lay in his bed, he'd insisted again on taking the floor. She listened to the night sounds of the canyon, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the steady rhythm of Joaquin's breathing. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and choices. But tonight, she was exactly where she wanted to be. 3 weeks passed like a dream. Cordelia learned to grind corn and preserve meat, to identify edible plants and predict weather from the behavior of birds. Her hands, once soft and white, grew, calloused from work. Her body, freed from the constraints of corsets and bustles, grew strong from hiking the canyon trails. Most surprising of all, her mind, so long focused on social graces and family obligations, began to expand into territories she'd never imagined. Joaquin was an excellent teacher-patient, thorough, encouraging. He never made her feel foolish. For her ignorance, never showed impatience when she struggled with tasks he found simple. Under his tutelage, she learned to move silently through the brush, to start a fire with flint and steel, to read the stories written in animal tracks across the canyon floor. You have good instincts, he told her one morning as they returned from checking snares. Most white people move through the world like they're fighting it. You're learning to work with it instead. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. She found herself treasuring these moments of approval, these small signs that she was becoming someone worth respecting. Their relationship remained carefully circumspect, friendly, companionable, but with an underlying current of tension that grew stronger with each passing day. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her pulse quicken. More than once, their hands lingered when they touched accidentally. The air between them seemed to shimmer with unspoken possibilities. On a morning when summer heat lay heavy over the canyon, they rode to a hidden pool fed by a small waterfall. The place was magical ferns growing in the spray, dragonflies darting over the clear water, the sound of falling water echoing off red rock walls, singing. Bird loved this place, Joaquin said, dismounting and helping Cordelia down. She said it was where the spirits came to bathe. Cordelia could understand why. The pool seemed to exist outside ordinary time, a place where anything might happen. It's paradise. The water's good for swimming, clean and not too cold. She looked at the inviting pool, then down at her simple dress. I couldn't. It wouldn't be proper. Proper according to whose rules? Joaquin's voice was gentle but challenging. Your father's? The townspeople who would never set foot in this sacred place. There's no one here but us and the spirits, and I think they would approve of honest pleasure. The idea was scandalous. Ladies simply didn't swim, especially not with men present. But then again, she was no longer trying to be a lady in the conventional sense. She was trying to be herself, whatever that might mean. Turn around, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Joaquin complied without question, settling, with his back to her on a sun-warmed boulder. Cordelia's hands trembled as she unlaced her dress and stepped out of it, leaving her in chemise and drawers. The sun on her bare arms and shoulders felt like freedom made manifest. She slipped into the pool with barely a splash, gasping at the shock of cool water against heated skin. The sensation was incredible, weightless, cleansing, utterly liberating. Oh, she breathed, floating on her back and staring up at the canyon walls. Oh, this is wonderful. The spirits approve, I think, Joaquin said without turning around. Your laughter carries their blessing. She swam for nearly an hour, reveling in the simple joy of her body moving freely through water. When she finally emerged, she felt transformed, not just clean, but somehow purified on a deeper level. Joaquin had laid her dress on a nearby rock to warm in the sun. As she reached for it, he finally turned, and their eyes met. Something passed. Between them then, a recognition, an acknowledgement of what had been building between them for weeks. Cordelia, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. She stood there in her wet undergarments, water dripping from her hair, and felt no shame. Only desire and the growing certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. I love you, she said. Simply, the words falling into the sacred silence of the hidden pool like stones into still water. Joaquin stood slowly, his dark eyes never leaving her face. And I love you. More than I thought possible after singing Bird. Is that wrong? To love again so soon after? Love isn't bound by schedules or expectations. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. My heart tells me this is right. My spirit tells me Singing Bird sent you to me, that she would want me to live and love again. Cordelia reached for him then, her wet hands framing his face as she drew him down to her. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked, and answered. The second was deeper, full of weeks of careful restraint finally released. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Marry me, Joaquin said against her forehead. Not because it's expected or profitable or convenient, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Yes, she whispered without hesitation. Yes, but not because I need rescuing or security or protection. Because I choose you. Because I love who I am when I'm with you. They were married 3 days later by a traveling preacher who asked no questions about the Apache man and the white woman who met him at the crossroads. The ceremony was simple vows spoken under an endless sky. Rings fashioned from silver wire Joaquin had traded for in town. A kiss that sealed their commitment to build something new together. The townspeople of Millfield were scandalized of course. Cordelia's father disowned her publicly, declaring she was dead to him. Mortimer Blackthorne ranted about breach of contract and damaged goods. But their voices seemed to come from another world, one that had no power over the sanctuary. Cordelia and Joaquin had created in their hidden canyon, years past. Cordelia bore 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, each one a bridge between their parents' different worlds. She taught them to read and write in English, while Joaquin taught them Apache traditions and the old ways of living in harmony with the land. The children grew up bilingual in language and culture, equally at home in both worlds, belonging fully to neither and therefore free to create their own path. The ranch they built became known throughout the territory as a place where travelers could find honest help regardless of their color or background. Cordelia's transformation from pampered society girl to capable frontier woman became the stuff of local legend. Some told it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of defying convention. Others spoke of it as proof that love could transcend any boundary if hearts were brave enough to follow it. On quiet evenings, when their children were grown and scattered to build their own lives, Cordelia and Joaquin would sit on their porch and watch the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. Sometimes they spoke of the strange chain of events that had brought them together: a runaway bride, a kind stranger, a handful of food shared without expectation of return. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been at that station? Cordelia asked one evening, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. I don't wonder, Joaquin replied, his arm tightening around her. I know. I would have spent the rest of my life as half a person, honoring the dead but forgetting to live. You taught me that love doesn't diminish by being shared, it multiplies. And you taught me that I was worth more than the price others put on me, that I could choose my own value, my own purpose, my own happiness. As the stars emerged overhead, ancient and eternal, they sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to become who they were meant to be. The Apache who gave food to a runaway bride had received something far more precious in return: a second chance at joy, a partner for the journey, and the knowledge that sometimes the most unexpected encounters carry the seeds of transformation. In the end, they had changed each other forever, just as the best love stories always do, not by trying to reshape each other into something different, but by creating the space for each other to become their truest selves. And in that space, in the sanctuary of their shared devotion, they found something rarer than gold and more lasting than stone, a love that honored the past while embracing the future, rooted in choice rather than circumstance, strong enough to bridge any divide.